far into it, so we can have that visit. There we go.
Yeah, for sure. I can. I'll start it. I'll start from the top.
Good. Super cool.
Great. Okay,
Welcome.
so stick and stay is classified as a utility modifier. That is how Canadian regulatory PMRA likes to view it. We're happy for that. The reason why it is classified as a utility modifier is because we do modify the water and convert it into an excellent delivery system. So that's the reason behind it. We don't increase the efficacy of any active ingredient. We just simply deliver more of it to the plant in a more efficient manner.
Mm-hmm.
So the underlying technology that drives stick and stay is called hydrocolloids or gums, if you're familiar with that terminology. Our company, Attune, is actually born out of a much larger food company. I am a food scientist by training. And that company solely dealt in using different combinations of hydrocolloids to come up with the best unique solution for whatever huge mega food company you can imagine. They were all our customers. And my job was to go around the world and say, here's the fit that you need. You have a specific issue. Here's our custom blend that we did for you. So we have really extensive knowledge on hydrocolloids. And what we said is, well, shoot, we know how to stabilize food systems. We know how to manage water. We know how to do all the same things that you do in ag spray applications. Let's just apply our technology to ag and see what we get.
Mm-hmm.
And what we ended up doing is creating something that's quite different than what you find in a typical utility modifier / adjuvant type product. Most things on the market now are surfactant based, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they're surfactant based is forever and always, and from way back when, active ingredients were contact. So you wanted to spread out that material edge to edge, get as much full coverage as you possibly could, because that was really the best way to deliver it at the time. As time progressed, you got more and more chemicals that actually started to become systemic for translaminar or some locally systemic activity. And in order to get the maximum benefit of that, you need to actually deliver a higher volume of the active ingredient to the leaf. And if you are using a surfactant-based delivery system that's going to spread out on the surface, you're going to create a really thin film, and surfactants don't have brakes, so they just roll right off the edge, right? So you hear them say, oh, we have these spreader stickers. It's kind of a misnomer. If you're reducing the surface tension, you can't stop it. So what we said is, okay, wait, let's not reduce the surface tension. We're going to make every droplet be just like a water droplet. Except for it's going to have this great internal structure that's going to hold on to all those active chemicals. It's going to create a super uniform droplet, and it's going to distribute those uniform droplets across the leaf. So what we found is we actually get equal to or better coverage, right? But because we don't lose any volume in our droplets, we actually get more volume to that plant surface. So you can think of it this way. If I have a droplet that's this big and I spread it out, if I'm looking at it from the top down, it takes this much coverage. If my droplet is full and takes up the same physical space on the leaf, I have this much more volume.
That's a 3D image versus a 2D.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. So we did lots of Syngenta spray cards, and we did all sorts of studies to determine spray patterns and coverage. And what we found is we did a side-by-side study where you sprayed herbicide by itself, let the leaves dry, stamped out some leaf discs, and we ran them through a GC to quantify the active component. We didn't care if it got in the plant or if it was on the plant. We just said, tell us how much is there. And then we did it with ours in combination with stick and stay. And what we found is we got about a 35% improvement in the amount of active, simply because we just got more there and kept it there. That's all we cared about. So, for us, the most important thing is coverage, but it's the volume that you actually tie with that coverage that gives you the best delivery. So you'll hear us just talk all day long about stick and stay being really a superior delivery system. We don't talk about adjuvants or utility modifiers or use any of those terminologies. We just like to call it a delivery system, because 90+% of what you're spraying is water. So let's manage the biggest portion of the tank using our stick and stay hydrocolloid based system in combination with some humectants to keep those droplets the right size and make sure that we reduce the evaporative loss so that that droplet can sit on that surface for a longer period of time. So if you're trying to do systemics, or even if you're trying to do contacts, if you keep that droplet wet for a longer period of time, one, for systemics, way easier for that systemic to have enough time to get into the plant. And two, if it's a contact and I need a bug to come and eat it, it's in the perfect form for them to be able to come and get it. So we found that residence time, that increase in the amount of time the droplet remains wet on the leaf surface, super critical. Also really critical because where you are is about as dry as it gets, right? You guys have super low humidity there. Historically, products like herbicides like Liberty, any of the glufosinate are very temperamental in dry weather conditions. That's why people don't like to use them, because they're not as efficient. But what we found is if you put it in combination with stick and stay, you can dramatically improve the residence time. So that Liberty, which takes forever to get into the plant, even though they call it a contact, it's kind of like a semi-systemic, it actually has enough time to get in there, and you get a much better burn off the product when you do it that way. So, it's all the same, it's all the same kind of mantra we have about just build a better delivery system. Doesn't matter what the active chemical is that you're trying to deliver. We don't care if it's a herbicide, insecticide, fungicide, foliar fertilizer, PGR, whatever it is. We just want to get more of it there. So, I like to describe our tank mix as the school bus. So we just get in the water, create this internal structure that's like a school bus, and then whatever molecules you want to deliver, just sit on the bus seats. And then we just take it to where it needs to be really efficiently. So the whole purpose behind it is just get better delivery. We don't want to disrupt the leaf surface. We're not trying to penetrate, not what we're trying to do. And we're not trying to increase coverage by spreading. The biggest, besides reducing the amount of active ingredient you get on that leaf surface, the second most important thing that you have to pay attention to is evaporative loss. So if I spread out on the leaf surface, I create a super thin film. And thin films evaporate way faster than high volume droplets. So again, you're just kind of reinforcing why it's important to keep this high volume drop. The trick to this, and because you said you're an educator, which I love, because this product does take a little bit of education, we basically have to tell people, let's think about this exactly the opposite, that you've been thinking about, using adjuvants / utility modifiers, because everyone forever and always has said, spread it, spread it, spread it. Use a surfactant. You just need to use a surfactant. And the word surfactant became kind of interchangeable with adjuvant. And we're trying to say, no, let's break that. It's a different, there's a time and a place for everything. But we think using these high volume droplets that don't reduce surface tension is really the best way to deliver a much broader variety of active chemistry. And we're agnostic to the crop, right? It's just all about how you spray. So we have, for you guys, you have your broad acreage crops. Spray volumes are probably pretty low for you guys out there. I don't know if you have a lot of airplane sprays too. Drone sprays, I think, are just starting to come online up there for you guys. Those super low volume ones. It's so inexpensive to use stick and stay with those low volume applications. It's almost, it's basically pennies on the dollar to do it, because everything we do is as a volume percent.
Yeah.
Because we're adjusting the water. All we care about is the total volume of water. And the use rates are pretty low. So you would start with 0.125%. That's probably 90% of the use rate that you're going to run into. Every now and again, do you have any organic guys up there that you?
Not that I work with.
Not really, not too much. Anybody who's using in up in Canada, your lawn care guys have to use this iron herbicide that doesn't work at all by itself. They use it. We have on the eastern side, we have a lawn care company who we've worked with for a long time. I don't know if you know the company Weed Man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they've been using our stuff for years because we actually make those clean, easy chemistries actually perform and work. And it's just because we just give them time to get in there and do what they're supposed to do. So, for chemistries that are not quite as efficient, that have higher volumes, this really can greatly improve it. And we have a whole slew of organic herbicides down here that we use on a regular basis, and we've actually been able to cut some of the use rates almost in half.
Oh, wow.
And which for the guys down here is it's a huge savings, because they're using like 9%. Who uses 9%? That's a crazy use rate, but so if you can save them a few bucks here and there, it's really worth it. So Glenn always says they use Stick and Stay as a security blanket. So they sell it with it. He used to sell all the generics. I'm sure at the end used to have them in their repertoire as well. And he said really what it did is it just always made those generics perform more evenly. It would get them that performance that they wanted to every single time. So he used to say, if you want to make sure that your generics are going to work effectively, make sure you always pair it with Stick and Stay. So I'll tell you the one issue that we run into Canada, which is a little bit of a bummer. Canadian labels are really specific.
Yeah.
So you will run into a few products that say you must use a surfactant, you must use the MSO. There's nothing you can do about that. If it tells you you just have to use MSO, but it doesn't give you a use rate, you can just use a dash and then use ours.
Yeah.
If it tells you to use a specific amount, pint per 100, or, sorry, that's a US, 0.125, 0.25% of MSO or some other kind of surfactant-based adjuvant, we will do no good to put us in combination, because a surfactant-based adjuvant is working in exactly the opposite way that we're trying to work, and we can't overcome that level of additional surfactant that's been added to the system. So if you run into a situation where a label that says you must use, 0.125% of an MSO or a ethoxylate or one of those, organosilicones, we're not going to be, that's not a fit for us. We're not going to use that. But if you have the luxury of using whatever you want, or if you have the luxury of choosing your use rate, it says use the MSO, but you can just use a hair of it, and then you can use this at regular strength and you'll be just fine.
Yeah.
Active ingredients that contain an in-can formulation that has a little bit of a surfactant in it is not a problem. Okay. So that level of surfactancy, not an issue. So I always use the example of Roundup. In the US, we have this thing called Power Max. I think your name is like a little bit different up there. I hate that product. It's terrible because it's chock full of surfactants, and it's just a bad actor. It does not play well when you try to mix it with other ingredients. So Stick and Stay has a very specific chelating agent in it to protect against formulations like Roundup Power Max that have a lot of additional surfactancy in there. It's the sole purpose it's in there is to, for herbicides that are really highly formulated. It kind of gives you a little extra protection against different levels of surfactants that are in the system.
Yeah, got a question for you. So
sure,
I get what the label says and all that stuff. Have you done some trialing of displacing a rate of something as a surfactant or an adjuvant with the Stick and Stay? Have you done trials with that stuff?
Yeah, so what we tell everyone is our first suggestion is if you have the luxury of not using anything, don't use anything. If you can use the smallest amount possible, then you can use it, because that's essentially equivalent to what you'd get in an in-can formulation. Yeah. So, I don't know what measure to tell you, but just a small, liter per 100, something small. You can do it. We have done a lot of work in combination with oils. So crop oils, those kind of things that some people use as active ingredients. And what we found is, the label, it usually says around 2% or so for oils. We say if you use 0.5% or less in combination with Stick and Stay, you will get excellent results. It works beautifully. When you start getting above that 0.5% use rate is when you start seeing kind of a little bit of a degradation in the ability of the Stick and Stay to do its job effectively. So, rule of thumb is steer clear surfactants if at all possible. Second thing is use the teeniest amount you can. And then if you have to use something use something that's oil-based, crop oil or something like that, cut the rate down to 0.5% and you're going to be in good shape.
So most contact things, like one thing what's interesting is here, we've got a product called Diquat. You're familiar with that?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
I'll let you guys have Paraquat there or whatever, but the potato label does not have a surfactant with it, and the rest do, and typically it's a non-ionic or something, and it's very low, like 0.1% of things or whatever. And have you experimented with Stick and Stay and Diquat?
Our guys here in the US use Paraquat all the time. Our Midwest guys use it all the time, the ones who are growing the same crops that you guys are using with excellent results. I want to say Glenn actually, when he was under the banner of the ACPI, I think they did a whole slew of different herbicides. So what we did probably for the first 3 years that we were selling Stick and Stay in Canada, Glenn took them and sent them off to a third-party lab and did a lot of research with them. And, every single one of the studies came back, you can definitely improve what you have. But we swapped it totally out. So your potato example is just how comfortable you are with the label and exactly what the label says to get around it. Glenn is very cavalier, but
I'm outcome based. I'm an outcome based person versus what the fine print says and stuff. I just want the best opportunity for outcome for my people. So that's how I roll too. So Glenn and I are aligned on a lot of stuff. So and if you've had I know Glenn actually has a lot of experience with it. He's seen it, all over the place. He has a great story. If he hasn't told you, he's such a good storyteller. He's a good storyteller. So he told me this story where he had dropped some material off to a farmer that he knows. And the next day the farm called him and said, "You better get to this farm right now." And he's like, "Oh, I'm dead. This is it. This is the one." He shows up and the guy's like, "I want you to see what this stuff looked like coming out of my sprayer," because I thought it was clogging the nozzles because it didn't do any plume. It went straight down. And he thought, "Oh, that's it. This stuff has ruined my whole thing." And he said, "No." I went back and looked and couldn't believe that it actually did really fall straight down. So, that uniform distribution of the droplets, the ability to hold on to all that moisture just gives it such a great spray pattern and an excellent drift control. It really does. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been used just to make yourself feel a little more comfortable. It's been used all over Saskatchewan for, the last 3 years.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I expected that as well. So, and is there?
They were usually buying them, at least a truckload every single year. So there was a good bit going.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's great. Okay. Well, I'm comfortable with all the things we've talked about. Is there any tips, tricks, kind of stuff?
Yeah. For you guys, for sure. Most important thing, it always goes in the water first. So it's not like a regular surfactant based adjuvant utility modifier that goes in last. We want to be in the water first, right? Because all we care about is the water. So if you have to adjust your water, if you have hard water, if you need to put AMS in there, if you're doing some pH adjustment, do that before. So it's okay to fix the water and fix the water first and then put the Stick and Stay in, then add all the rest of your remaining chemistries that you want to do. We also have guys who do your like pony tanks, your nurse tanks out in the field. You can just treat the water. Yeah. So you can treat and then it's done. And then you just pipe it into whatever you're putting into your actual spray rig when you're ready to do it. So you can absolutely do that. That's a really common practice we do down here in the US all the time for those big guys in the Midwest who are spraying lots and lots of acres. Second important thing, because you are in Canada, we like for the temperature to stay above 50 Fahrenheit, and I can't remember what that is in Celsius. 4? Is it 4?
Yeah, be I prefer like 8 plus, right? So the plant's doing
Okay.
yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. So we don't care what the air temperature is. We don't care what the water temperature is. We only care that the temperature of the jug itself is kept above 50 just for ease of use.
Yeah.
Once it starts getting a little bit cooler, it starts to get thicker.
Sure.
And if you get low enough, it will freeze. Now, the good thing is it's totally reversible. You just got to warm it back up. It's no problem. It doesn't affect the functionality. None of that matters. But you have to store it, obviously, in a heated warehouse in the winter time. Or better yet, just use it all before the winter comes, which is the best way. Right. And we'll ship it to you in the spring. And and that's really the only, super like make sure you do these things with this product. Yeah. Other word of caution I would tell you, and maybe this is an issue for you because you don't have a whole lot of very sensitive plants, but if you are spraying anything that has known phytotoxic elements to it, so if you have sulfur, if you have something that has real sensitivity to light, we are going to deliver more active to the plant. So nitrogen foliar fertilizer is a great example. Okay. We will deliver more nitrogen to the plant. So if you have a sensitive plant, it is possible that you will get some spotting. We had one example happen with that situation for a pepper farm in California where they got a little spotting. It was not a big deal. Mm-hmm. It's just a little fertilizer burn. They'd plank her out of it. It wasn't a problem. But it just was an excellent showcase to really, demonstrate we really do deliver more.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, to the plant. So, some people say, well, great, that means I can reduce it, whatever. That's up for you to say. We don't make recommendations on reducing. You can do whatever you want. That's your thing. We always tell people to use the label rates for what they do, but we just know, for things that are already sensitive, watch out for that. We have 0 phytotoxicity. So in and of itself, you will never have any phytotoxic effects from using our products. But it's all, use rate dependent. If you deliver more to the plant of something that's phytotoxic, you could potentially get that as a side issue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Product is totally water soluble, so super easy cleanup. We don't spray, we don't clog nozzles. Use rates are generally pretty low. You don't run into that issue at all. I don't believe I've ever heard of anyone in Canada clogging a nozzle. Mm-hmm. I have heard one person in the US clog a nozzle, but they were using, I can't remember. It is a wheat herbicide, but it has a little bit of chalk to it. And it specifies a nozzle size, and the customer is using a smaller nozzle than what happened. That's the only example I can think of a nozzle that actually got clogged using this product. So super user friendly, very easy. It's category 4. So if we could call it non-toxic, we would call it that. Doesn't have any signal words on the jar. It's as clean as it gets. I mentioned before, all of the ingredients in that formulation is food grade. So it is very, very clean technology, as clean as you're going to find.
Yeah. Okay.
On the market. Yeah. Right now.
Okay.
Let me think of what else. All the crops that are in your area, canola, we put them on all of them. All your pulse crops up there, they've been on all that stuff.
Yeah.
No issues.
Potatoes would be fine. We've got
potatoes for sure.
Like I've got a number of, we'll call it leaf cutter bees on alfalfa. For alfalfa seed production, there's a zone.
Yeah. Okay.
Zone of that kind of stuff, and they often have to do insecticide treatments for flushing fungus bugs and stuff. So this sounds like that would be a negative with that. So
perfect for that.
But yeah, okay. Yeah, I think I've got my mind around anything that like Glenn did a good job, as you know, ahead of time to have me prepped for it and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's
he's if you're looking for a quick answer, he's great for that. He's been selling it for a while now. He's got a good handle. He can probably give you some good customer testimonials also. Yeah. So if that's helpful for you to have, I'm sure Glenn can give you that stuff too. I generally don't keep records of the Canadian customers because I just like to know the retailers. So, but yeah, I have been out and talked to quite a few actually. Canadian customers up there. It's great. I have good fun, except for I only ever get to go in the winter time. So I would like to go one time to Saskatchewan in the summer.
Well, other than your vacation windows, that Egg in
Yeah.
Motion is Egg in Motion's very much, you'd enjoy that, I would think.
Yeah.
Stops and they had
Yeah.
30,000 people walking through that thing last year.
Oof,
Like
a
that.
lot.
So that's enough, and get to see all the
Yeah.
greatest this and that. But
Yeah.
are you guys? What other products do you guys have? Do you have other products?
Mhm. So
bringing
we
in-
started out, so we had 2 adjuvants that we started with. We actually just got our approval for a line of insecticides. So we have true FDA approved insecticides that are available here in the US. Our Canadian registration is ongoing.
Mhm.
Hopefully we have like a year and a half, then we'll get our PMRA approval for the insecticides to be sold there. They'll be a good fit for you guys. I know you don't do a lot of insecticide sprays in your region. Other regions maybe that are more fruit and veg heavy have a little bit more, but any insect that's 4 millimeters or less that you would spray for, soft-bodied insects, plant bugs, chinch bugs and grass, that kind of stuff, we're going to cover. We're going to get them. So completely physical mode of action, totally different than what is currently out on the market. Don't affect any biological system on the insect. We do a great job of trapping, any bug that's that 4 millimeters or under. We do a couple of first and second instars of caterpillars even we can grab.
Oh, wow.
Really effective. So we actually have 4 different products that we sell here in the US. One is organic classified here. For Omri, it would be, I can't remember for you guys, EcoCert for you guys up there. We have one that's specific for trees. We have one that's specific for row crops, and we have one that's specific for fruit and veg. So it kind of covers the whole gamut of crops that you have, right along the US border there.
That's exciting.
For us, so
yeah.
So we're super excited about that. And then we have a whole slew of things in our pipeline that, as fast as my brain can work, we'll get them out into the world. But our insecticide really threw us for a loop here because they kind of changed our process here at the very end. The EPA had to add an Endangered Species Act step.
Oh my.
So essentially what you have to do is prove that you will not harm any endangered species. So an endangered insect, plant, mammal, anything. And it's a really rigorous, laborious process. And of course, we just happen to be the very first biochemical who went through the process. So of course, process in quotation marks, because they're trying to figure it out. And it's never good to be different than what they're used to seeing anyway. And then we had to go through this process that they were creating on the fly. So it took us almost 2 years delay to get through that process.
Yeah.
And then every single product in the US is now going to have to go back through that process.
Oh, so there's no grandfathering of stuff. So
everything, every single product. We're going to have a lot of products. We've already started to see them. A lot of people are just retiring them. They know we're never going to make it through the process.
No, well, so we're seeing the same kind of issues being impacted on you from Canada, or are they leaving you alone?
Canada has actually been okay. The good thing for us is our technology is so clean that we get to take the easiest path, which is nice to get through. Canada also allows us to use a lot of our US data. So we get to use a lot of US data. Canada is just a lot more specific about what you have. The EPA doesn't care if your product works. They just care if it's safe. California cares if your product works. Florida cares if your product works. But the EPA as a whole doesn't care if your product works. Canada cares. So you have to submit all your efficacy data and all that kind of stuff. And you have to have 3 individual studies. And there's just a lot more from that we had to do that we didn't have to do here in the US. But for the EPA, but that we had to do for other states. So it kind of was, it was a little bit not too bad. We have a great regulatory group as a husband and wife team out of Ontario that does it for us, and they just tell us exactly what to do, and we just send it to them, and they magically make all the paperwork the correct form. So Canada hasn't been too bad. Europe is awful.
Yeah.
Europe is awful. I mean, as clean as our technology is, it's going to take us between 5 and 10 years to get registered there. Just
I understand. I was talking with a company, so they're out of Ireland, right? And it can happen. It's a very streamlined process. They're pro-business, they get it and all that stuff. But then that covered, and then it goes to the EU for an overarching approval. And just it's get in line, and it's 5 years, and that's that.
That's it. There's nothing you can do. Isn't that terrible? So this is the other part that was really infuriating. And it's maybe just because we're a little bit spoiled here, but in the US, before you start your process, they classify you. So they class you as a conventional chemistry or biochemical. They do it before anything happens. So you know from the beginning, okay, biochemical, 2-year timeline, plus whatever it takes you to get through the Endangered Species Act, you can kind of, and then conventional, 5-year timeline, 20 times more studies, all that kind of stuff. In Europe, you have to submit all the studies, and then they say, oh yeah, we'll classify you as a biochemical.
Oh.
So there's no advantage to doing it. Like what if I still have to do all the same conventional studies? What's the purpose of giving, we're trying to give you clean chemistries. This is what you guys want.
Yeah.
You're getting rid of chemistries left and right in Europe. Let's get them some new stuff. But the process is just so cumbersome.
Yeah.
We just kind of, said, is this going to take us a while? Mexico, 2 years. Piece of cake in Mexico. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's coming. Yeah. So we'll have a whole slew of new products coming in. But our first foray into the market was the adjuvant to kind of get our feet wet. We figured it was a nice universal thing that we could do. And then, we'll start with the active ingredients next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds good.
Yeah. Good stuff to come.
Well, it's always neat to look ahead and see it. And when it's ready, you'll bring forward some stuff to get out on some trials and things like that.
Definitely.
Glenn, and as you know, he'll do his thing, and it'll just be looked after. So that's super cool.
So for sure, we'll definitely make sure you guys are, Glenn has been our channel to market for a while. We have a couple other ones on the eastern side who help us get into that market over there. So we're always happy to to start getting stuff to you guys so we can get it out to the Canadian farmers.
Yeah, right on. Great. Yeah. Thanks, Maureen. I really appreciate.
Oh, you're welcome.
New friend, right?
So, of course.
But, I look forward to. Oh, you'll just communicate through Glenn, but if you do end up this way, it'd be great if you go for a bite or whatever. And if you do, one thing I do is on a weekly basis with my group. Like we just had ADM on this morning, for example, just to talk about fertilizer markets and all this stuff. And we had like a couple million acres represented on the call that,
nice.
It's one guy and he's got 10 guys. And so that's what it turns out to. But they're not all daily customers, but they'll answer the phone when we call. And then if we have, and that, so what I'm getting at is I'll be having Glenn to speak to that. And then he's got some glufosinate, I'm sure you're aware, as well, working with, and we'll do our best to represent your product and understand that. And it's very much aligns with what my business, iFarm business, is all about. So that's awesome.
Perfect. That's perfect. We love it. Well, and Glenn knows where to find me. He can just call me whenever. So if you need more information, if you have a specific question about something, feel free to pick up the phone and give me a call.
Sounds groovy. Well, enjoy your garden or whatever else you get up to.
Thank you.
And, I can't do that today because it's white out. Anyway.
Right. And you got a little time yet. Before you need to worry about that.
The virtual stuff is what happens right now.
There you go. I get you.
Thanks for your time. Have a great.
Very good to meet you, Dean.
Yep,
have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
I know.
Yep, bye.